these numbers just crossing. Let's see what we've got. Brad, the interesting note too, as we look to the markets, is that the markets may not even move that much, depending on this number.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the futures right now, and I know we just got the numbers out, so I'll toss things back over to you in a hot second. Just keeping an eye on the futures as we've been tracking them throughout the day. We were pointing to a higher open coming into this report, and so ultimately right now it seems like the futures, as of right now, are still holding on to those gains. And so with that, let me toss things back over to you with the numbers.
You know what? I actually thought I was misreading this.
I did too.
This is a huge miss. 218,000 jobs created. There were expectations that we would hit 1 million new jobs created. It's 266,000. Still quite a miss. The unemployment rate, little change, 6.1%. But that means that unemployment rate actually ticked up. The expectations were that it would go a bit lower to 5.8% again. Perhaps if this was in March or April or May of last year, this would be a decent jobs report. But the fact that we are 14 months into the pandemic, the vaccination rate is way up, and so many businesses are open, no other way to look at this, Brad, than just a huge miss and quite disappointing.
Yeah, it is pretty disappointing, and I'm continuing to keep an eye on the futures where there still is not a ton of change, at least from what I've been calibrating here on my screen and refreshing. But ultimately, shifting over to the wage data as well, because it is a big miss. The unemployment rate ticking up to 6.1%, so a 0.1% move higher there. And then additionally, you saw that also reflected among some of the ethnic groups that we were just discussing most impacted by this pandemic as well. The data for April suggested that the rising demand for labor associated with the recovery from the pandemic may have put upward pressure on wages. Now, this is notable because we've been discussing throughout this hour and leading up to this report the importance of seeing wages actually move a little bit lower here in this report, because that would signal that more of the travel, leisure, hospitality jobs were coming back, even more of those jobs in the retail kind of customer facing part of the industry as well. And so that's what I'm going to be continuing to watch to see how the markets digest here. And employment and healthcare changed little in April as well. Healthcare, an extremely critical sector in getting us through this pandemic.
Jill, I just want to note a couple things. This is incredible because, again, nobody was expecting numbers like this. So even more pressure on Joe Biden, as you mentioned, who's going to be talking about this at 11:30. Jill, we lost jobs in a lot of the industries we thought that were going to gain. Construction jobs fell. We had U.S. good producing jobs down 16,000. Retail jobs lost 15,000. Government jobs was the only area we saw growth. 48,000 jobs added in the month of April in government jobs. But all the other areas, factory jobs lost 18,000. March, we added 54,000 factory jobs. So this is a huge miss, Jill, and so many questions here. The other thing, we were talking about the racial breakdown and all of this. The black jobless rate actually ticked up, guys. It is 9.7% in the month of April. It was 9.6% in the month of March. The white jobless rate, 5.3%. It ticked down. The Hispanic population unemployment rate, 7.9%. That is unchanged from the last month. Asian unemployment rate, 5.7%. It ticked down from the month of March. So, Jill, this is a huge miss across the board in all the areas we thought were going to do well. Retail, construction, all of that stuff, nowhere to be seen in this report.
One of the traders that I follow on Twitter, Stephen Guilfoyle, just tweeted, "Oh boy," which I think just says it all. What in the world happened last month when it comes to jobs? Baker, quickly on the political front again, we're expecting to hear from Joe Biden at 11:30 this morning. We were thinking it would be some type of victory lap, that he would be, marking this history in terms of how many jobs were created in his first 100 days. What do you think we're going to hear from him now?
Jill, that is a great question, and you're absolutely right. If you were Joe Biden, you might have to scrap that speech you thought you were going to do, where you thought you were going to have this historical record of 2 million jobs added in your first 100 days. That's not even the case, Jill. We're not even close to that 2 million jobs number. While he's, of course, going to stay optimistic that it still looks potentially sunny down the horizon, he's got a big selling point he's going to have to give to Americans, Jill, knowing that only 200,000 jobs were added this month when we were expecting 1 million. That is a huge miss for the White House.
Brad, any movement on the future? futures.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked, because here's the expectation is that if the jobs report, number one, came in better than expected, then you actually might have seen a movement lower in some of the futures. And here's why, because that would signal that the economic recovery is stabilizing. It has been moderating, as the Fed Chair Jerome Powell has commented on recently. There you're taking a look at stock futures here and now, and you're seeing the Dow Jones Industrial Average actually start to move lower now. And so that, as my screen is recalibrating, we were higher just moments ago. It seems that we are moving lower here on the Dow now. But ultimately, here's the backdrop too, is that if you did see a blowout report, that would again signal that we were moving in the right direction, that the trend lines are locked in place, and that there would not be as much a need for additional economic type of incentives, additional of a accommodative policy from the Fed as well. And so now with this, it kind of puts off any tapering that the Fed might have moved up in terms of their timeline. And ultimately, I think the markets, they're going to be reacting to that and really thinking through that throughout the rest of today's activity.
One last note I want to make on this, guys, again, as we're going through all of this, leisure and hospitality added about 331,000 jobs. That was faster than what we saw in March. But what I had said earlier, that basically decreased with all the job losses we saw in manufacturing, retail, transportation, warehousing, professional services. Those cut jobs in the last month, so that's why that number now at 266. But I would say it does look optimistic when it comes to leisure and hospitality, adding about 331,000. That makes it seem like with more states opening up, more restaurants opening up, more bars opening up, that is a sunny disposition for this area. But the rest of this, guys, I mean, construction. Joe Biden is trying to sell this infrastructure plan, guys, saying that 16 million construction jobs are going to be added here. We lost construction jobs in April.
But that further makes the case for why it's needed, right?
True. Absolutely good point. That's a good point.